Hi, this is the presentation for orthographic development, otherwise known as phonics instruction. We do have two seminars about orthographic development. This will be the beginning of that, and then it continues on in our next presentation. And this one also follows what we'll do in class on Monday, October 15th, regarding phonological awareness and literacy development. So we're building on how a student learns to read from the bottom foundations on up. This presentation would be number 2 in 3 of how we build reading skills, starting with just the sounds of letters, moving on up into phonics, where we actually put letters to those sounds to create words. The objectives for this seminar are that you, the students, will examine phonics instruction and define phonics, alphabetic principle, and phonograms. And you, the students, will identify common digraphs and word families used when teaching phonics. We do this specifically in these reading courses because of your Texas exam and certification exam that you'll take at the end of this semester, hopefully. There are 2 components of the English Language Arts and Reading EC through 6 expectations that the teacher will understand phonological and phonemic awareness and how to utilize a variety of approaches to help young students develop this awareness and its relationship to written language. And teachers of young students will understand the importance of the alphabetic principle to reading English, and so on. To begin with the alphabetic principle, we know that the English language is built around a series of 26 letters that we call the alphabet, beginning with A to Z. We learn this first thing as we're growing up, maybe even as 2- and 3-year-olds. Some parents are reading to kids, and kids start to hear the alphabet when parents play, teachers play, other brothers, sisters, people, kids, friends play with the kids. One of the things we always do first is teach the alphabetic principle. This is a term that means children develop an understanding that specific letters or letter combinations are used to represent specific speech sounds in spoken words. This is where the kids start to recognize that the letters they're hearing in phonological awareness actually have a shape and a form or a symbol, and when they're put together, they start to create words that we use when we're speaking or reading. The fundamental insight that letters, which are also called graphemes, and sounds, which are phonemes, work together in systematic ways to form words is also the alphabetic principle. Children must develop this understanding, which provides the foundation for the development of decoding skills. We've got to teach the kids the combinations of letters and how they form words so that the students can, once they get a little older and actually begin reading, can look at these words and identify parts of words and be able to recognize how to say the words and what the words mean. Phonics, then, is a teaching method that has been used in education for many, many, many years. It went away for a little while, but has made a resurgence in education more within the last 10 years. But it is a method where teachers teach spoken sounds and written symbols together. This is taught in systematic and predictable ways so that the students begin to see patterns in how words are put together with the sounds that they make together, and used by readers to decode words in print. Phonics is the relationship between the graphemes and the phonemes of our English spoken language. And phonics instruction is teaching children letter to sound relationships. We're actually looking at the letters, putting them together, and recognizing those sounds that they make in words. Phonics instruction, when we're teaching, is explicit and systematic, usually lasting only up to about 20 minutes in mini lesson form. You wouldn't want to spend an hour or more on phonics instruction unless it was absolutely necessary, because it is quick. And once the kids obtain one piece or one phonogram or one sound, they're able to build and move on to the next. It's most effective when we connect it to something that means something to the kids. So we use something called a whole part whole instruction. That will make more sense, hopefully, momentarily. And then phonics instruction should develop word reading accuracy and automaticity. So the hope in phonics instruction is that we're beginning small enough and building on a small foundation that will just grow and grow, so that students begin to recognize patterns in words and then can become more automatic and more fluent with their reading. That whole part whole piece that I mentioned previously has to do with the idea that we introduce an idea, we dig down deeper into that idea, and then as a whole, again, we come back and practice that idea. I kind of think of this as the I do, we do, you do sort of, just as it's broken out into very specific parts and very specific things that happen during those parts. So we start with the whole text, a whole text. If we're going to teach something, it's best to read about it. Sit and do a read aloud with students. Read a whole text. And then we break down into the parts of and focus on parts of language that may be useful for reading. Once that's finished, move into whole text again, maybe reading something else or working in something that has words that allows for application and practice. For example, in class, when we do this seminar, I read How Rocket Learned to Read to the internship class, and we focus on the letter R. In this story, How Rocket Learned to Read, a little bird teaches Rocket the love of reading. And because there are 2 R's in that title, such a cute book, we focus on the letter R. So for whole part instruction, I would read the book. We would talk about, what is the letter R? Rocket's name begins with what? Letter R. What does that sound like? We work on the letter R, read the book, and then break it down into its smaller parts. In that smaller parts piece, I would have you, the students, listen for words that begin with the letter R. And on a piece of paper, you would write that down. So we're reading a whole text. We're breaking it down into parts when we listen for the smaller parts. And then at the end of reading, we would move into some kind of work with that bigger piece, that letter R. And it may be, again, another text. It may be a worksheet. It may be something else that you have your students working on. But in this case, you would bring back the idea that we're working with the letter R and practice and apply what the new knowledge of the letter R is. So from whole, we start with reading, we break it down into its smaller parts, and then I would have you guys in class silently sound out these words. We have a list of words that begin with the letter R. We know that the letter R sounds like so we can silently sound out each of these words with your knowledge of how letters sound. So I'll give you a second or two to read through these. All right, coming back to our list of R words, if you were able to say the first one as ranarium, you are right on. Ranigazoo, retrograde, rhinology, and russophobia. If you're able to define any of these words, pat yourselves on the back. Retrograde has been a word that's been in our vernacular for quite some time now, because we say, oh, that's so retro, meaning retrograde. If you think of that and think of when we say something is retro, we're talking about something from the past or something that goes backwards. So retrograde would mean in an instance of going backwards. Renarium, you might recognize arium, sort of maybe like aquarium. Renarium is like an aquarium for, I believe it's turtles or other amphibians. Rani-Gazoo is an idea that there's zaniness or a little craziness going on. Rhinology is with ology. You would know that means the study of something. So rhinology would be the study of the Latin term of rhinus or something that has to do with the nose or the nasal cavity. So rhinology is the study of things that would have to do with your nose. And then russophobia is phobia, you might know as the word fear, a synonym for fear. Russo is another term for Russia. So this would be the fear of things that are or have to do with Russia. So we went from whole to maybe talking about Rocket Learns to Read, having you think about words that begin with R, Rocket, and read, and then moving into a bigger whole part like studying specific words, other words that start with the letter R. So phonics instruction, just like other instruction that we've talked about before, must be explicit and systematic. Explicit means that we have to teach specific things in isolation. We have to be very, very, very specific with what we're teaching. If we are teaching the letter pair AI, we would only work on the letter pair AI and the sounds that those two letters together make and words that are created by using the vowel pair AI. You would then blend into whole words, so parts of words that we talk about to make words, put them together to blend them together. And then we practice in decodable text. So decodable text are those words and things that students can read and break apart already, and we're adding this new stuff to what we can already decode. Systematic means we introduce things first. In this case, since we're teaching phonics, we want to teach those sounds that students may already know, or those that are simplest to pick up, and those that are common that we might see quite often. The most useful letter sounds are good to teach first because the kids understand those. They hear them first. They may understand them quicker. Letter sounds that are easier to blend, those that are difficult, students kind of don't want to play with. So those that come together easier, like the AI vowel pair, the EA vowel pair, those that are A or E sounds are easier to blend. And then progress from simple to complex, specifically and systematically taking out, separating and taking out and separating confusing letters and sounds. There are those like Q and X that will be very difficult for your students. So you want to make sure to split those away from those that are simple because they're not, and then build up to when you can explicitly teach a mini lesson on X or Q. Phonics then has 5 different elements, starting with letter-sound correspondence. Remember, we're beginning with phonological awareness and the sounds that letters make, and now we're moving into phonics. So phonics is where letters and sounds come together to make words. That letter-sound correspondence then builds to phonograms, then letter combinations, then syllables, and parts of words that have meaning or meaning-carrying parts. In letter-sound correspondence, there are, as we know in our English alphabet, 26 graphemes, and out of those 26 graphemes, there are 44 phonemes. So in our alphabet, we have 26 letters that make their own sound, and then there are an additional number of sounds that our alphabet makes. The second piece of letter sound correspondence is that there are 500 plus combinations of graphemes that represent those 44 phonemes. Obviously, we have 500 some odd words in English that combine all of those 44 phonemes in our English alphabet. If you think about the letter F or the sound F or F, like you see the slash, the F, and the slash, that means sound. So if we think of the F sound, we want to identify how we can make that sound. Letters and sounds come together to make a particular sound. So in this case, the F in foot makes the F sound, foot. But then we combine the grapheme P and H, which also makes the F sound, in photo. In our area, because we have a very German influence, we can say that the grapheme P and F in Pflugerville make the F sound. In the word enough, which still has the F sound at the end, that G and H, the two graphemes, make the F sound. And then we can double up on our Fs, like in the word fluff, to create the F sound. Our indicators when teaching phonics are, remember you might have learned the long vowels, the short vowels, and those when you were learning how to write or create words. The long vowels indicated with a dash over the vowel. So when you see slash A with a hyphen or a dash over that letter, and then another slash, that's the long vowel sound. In this case, an A with a dash over it is the A sound. The short vowel sounds indicated with a swoosh just above the vowel. So you've got your slash and slash on either side of the vowel to indicate we're talking about sound, with that little almost U shape above the vowel. Short vowel sound in this case for the letter A is ah. So that little U above the A indicates the short vowel, like ah. The schwa is when we make the sound as we are saying a word. It's indicated in phonetic spelling with an upside down E between the two slashes. So if you're looking in the dictionary, or if you're trying to teach students about this particular sound, you would use that upside down E, which makes the sound. Think of the word about. We don't say about and we don't say about. We say about. That sound is called the schwa. Similar in fatigue. We don't say fatigue. We don't say fatigue. It's fatigue. So that there would be the schwa sound. Similar with official. Official even starts with an O. We don't say official normally. We don't say official normally. We say official. So think of that as a schwa. Say these words out loud as they're written phonetically. So for the first one, you see the D sound, D. You see the long vowel sound A. And then you see the T sound. D, A, T. D, A, T. Date. Date. So this is the phonetic spelling of the word date, D-A-T-E. This one, second one, the K sound, K. This is the short vowel sound A for ah, ah. And then the T, which as phonetically would be pronounced T. K-at, 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 cat. So our second example here would be the word cat, spelled phonetically. Third one, we have the S sound, the sound, and the n sound. Sun, sun, sun. So that would be sun, S-U-N, or even S-O-N. Hopefully you were able to recognize those pieces there. Many times our students confuse visually and auditorily the sights, the letters by sight and letters by sound. A lot of times you'll hear language learners, especially Spanish speakers who are learning English, auditorily very frequently confuse these sounds that you see. Visually, B and D and B and P look very similar together. They have to be very explicitly taught as you are teaching the alphabetic principle. And at the same time, you'd want to teach their sound so that the students recognize there's a difference in the way these letters are situated on the line where they're writing. So B and D and B and P are very visually confusing. M and N are also visually confusing, as well as Q and P. And now that students use iPads or laptops and more keyboard type print, Qs are becoming less confusing because they see them in that type print. When you're writing a Q or a P, students may not recognize them very clearly at first. Auditorially, you see those slashes around the letters mean these are the sounds. So auditorially, the F and the V sounds are very close, like F and V, very, very similar. I don't know if you can tell a difference in the recording or not, but when you hit your, when you say a V, there should be a little bit of a resonation on your tongue. It should vibrate a little bit when you hit the V. The F does not have that vibration. So there's just a slight difference in the two. The T and D, also very similar. You have to be very careful with that sharp T on the T, and the D has a little bit more of a dull D part to it. So think about the difference in T and D and how a student who's learning English, especially if they speak a different language at home, this has to be very, very explicitly taught. B and D, very similar. B and D. You hear that sort of vibration on your tongue with the B, and hopefully that's pretty clear with your students. You've got to have them practice that and make sure they know they can feel that B, that vibration on their tongue. The I and E of the short I and the short E vowel sounds, I and E, very, very similar. Think of the words pin and pen, P-I-N and P-E-N. Very, very similar sound, and they're very, very close together. So students may mishear that sound because they're so close. And ah and ah and So that ah is O and is U. Very confusing for some students to hear that, especially if you're trying to teach whole words. In English, we have a whole bunch of rules that we have to follow, and C and G are two that we're going to explicitly talk about today. The C rule is that just know that C is tricky. It's got multiple sounds. Sometimes it might sound like a S, sometimes it might sound like a K, depending on what follows it. So usually there's a series of vowels that follow this consonant C, and depending on what follows it, determines what sound that C will make. For example, when followed by A, O, or U, the C makes the K sound. Think of the word cake. Think of the word couch. When followed by E, I, or Y, the C makes the S sound. Think of cycle, ceiling. So remember, the C sound changes depending on the vowels that follow it. If followed by an A, O, or U, it makes the K sound. If followed by E, I, or Y, it makes the S sound. The G rule is very similar to the C rule in that it changes depending on what follows it. I should say what vowels follow it. If an E, I, or Y follows a G, think of the word gym, like G-E-M, or G-Y-M, gym. If G is followed by E or I, it has the J sound. If G is followed by A, O, or U, it has the hard G sound like G, garage, guy. If G is followed by A, O, or U, it has the hard G sound like G. So we've built on letter sound correspondence, looking at tricky alphabet there with the C and the G. Moving into word patterns, this is where words start to come together for kids in phonics. They're putting the sound together with letters, and we do that in pieces. CVC means consonant, vowel, consonant. And those are 3-letter words that begin with a consonant, they have a vowel in the center, and end with a consonant. A vowel comes between 2 consonants in a syllable, usually represents a short vowel sound. Think of the word cat, sat, ran, pen. That's usually one of the first patterns of words that students learn are the CVC words. CV words, when a consonant is followed by a vowel, creating the long vowel sound in that word, you hear words like go or so. Then we have vowel consonant, bossy E or silent E, however you learn that. You could use either one of those. The bossy E just shows the students that E makes everything happen. It's bossing every other letter in that word around. Or you could call it the silent E if you've taught your students that it just makes that vowel say its name, then you're teaching the silent E. When 2 vowels appear in a word and one is an E at the end of the word, the first vowel is generally long and the final E is silent. Think of again the word cake, C-A-K-E. The A is saying its name, it's long vowel, A, but that E is silent. That bossy E is telling the other vowel what to do. Then you have CVVC words. The VV is 2 vowels together, making a vowel digraph. When 2 vowels come together, the first vowel carries the long sound and the second sound is silent. There is a cute little song that the students will learn that essentially says, when 2 vowels go walking, the first one does the talking. If you teach your kids that way, they're going to pick up vowel digraphs very, very quickly. Think of the word toad, T-O-A-D. 2 vowels together are O and A. The A is definitely silent there. All we hear is that long O sound. So these are word patterns that you would teach your students very explicitly and systematically to help them build on how to create words. To teach decoding, you want to select words that you've already taught because the students have heard them, they've probably seen them before, and words with patterns that you've already taught. Progress from VC words to CVC words and then build on that. Use words that the students are going to see quite often, especially in text that you're reading or word wall words that you have up on your boards in your room. That goes with familiar vocabulary as well. Blend sounds without stopping. So earlier when we were looking at the phonetic spelling of cat, K-A-T, and k-at, try to start with the whole word and then break it apart. Try not to continue asking the students to separate those sounds. We want them to get them blended quicker. And then follow sounding out a word with its fast pronunciation. So if the students aren't blending fast and you do have to have them separate out each sound, go quicker, make them do it faster. So it's cat, 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 cat. Make them say it really fast. And then move from orally sounding it out to silently sounding it out. So you definitely want the students to continue working on hearing the sounds, but as soon as you know that they've got it, you've done your assessments, you've done some anecdotal notes, you've practiced with the students enough, encourage them and definitely have them work on sounding out these letters, putting these words together, or reading these letters as words silently. Phonograms, I've talked about briefly already, but they are simply word families, letters that come together to make a sound, a syllable part, or a series of sounds. These word families are many, and we will look at a few in just a moment, but we think of the phonograms as the rhyme within a word, R-I-M-E, not rhyming like something sounds alike, but as part of a word that makes up the bulk of the word. We are looking at these phonograms as the rhyme as part of a word. Knowing phonograms are necessary for advanced automatic word recognition. And you don't want to teach phonograms first. You have to teach students the rules of all of the other more individual sounds, and then allow students to start putting them together, teach students how to start putting them together. Phonograms help students with spelling. Phonograms help students chunk words to help them read quicker. If they recognize a phonogram in a word, or especially in longer words or compound words, the students will be able to recognize those words faster, which does enable more and better fluency. And again, multisyllabic words are words that have many syllables in them. If students recognize patterns in phonograms, then they're actually going to pick up those words faster. Think of rhinology before and how we broke that out, that word rhinology. Logi, we chunked out, and we understand that logi means the study of, and rhino means having to do with the nasal cavities in our faces. So that's what we mean by chunks and working with multisyllabic words. For teaching letter combinations, you know that these are groups of letters that are side by side and they make a particular sound. And the ones that we see most often are taught first. You may have heard of the H brothers, like TH and SH and CH. There are a couple of them on this page here. We teach these two letters together as a sound so that we can start building words with students. So if we teach TH in one 15-minute mini lesson, you're going to look at just words that have to do with the th sound, that, then, this. Same thing with the hu sound and the ch sound. So you would start teaching with these that are the most common pairs that students are going to see, or the most commons that we see when we read even as adults. There are vowel pairs too, not just the TH, but also EE, EA, ER, AR, OU. Again, like you see here, all, ALL, does not have to be a pair. A digraph can be, not a digraph, but a blend can be more than two, sorry. A consonant digraph is when two consonants are side by side and they make one sound, like the ch sound in CH. We're not saying k, we're saying ch. So it's two consonants together creating one sound. Vowel digraphs are two vowels together, side by side, that create one sound. Like AI makes the A sound. EA makes the E sound. So there's consonant digraph, two consonants together to make one sound. Vowel digraph, two vowels together to make one sound. Diphthongs are one of my favorites. I just love this word. It's the vowel O mixed with another letter that gives it a funny articulation at the end. The vowel diphthong OY makes the oi sound, like toy. It doesn't flow as one. When I say toy, I actually hear what could be two syllables. It's not two syllables, but it sounds like it has two parts. So think of a diphthong as two letters together where the tongue shifts position during articulation. And while it sounds like it has two parts, like cow, it doesn't. It's not two parts. It's just our sounding out these letters together, creating a diphthong. This is remember the O indicates a diphthong, and then it will have either a Y, a W, a U, or an I following it. Those letter combinations create this theory called a diphthong. Toy, destroy. Cow, bow. House, boil, coin. So practice saying those so that you can identify the way that we hear it as almost two sounds and recognize those as diphthongs. R-controlled vowels are when a vowel is followed by an R, it makes a different sound than what we see on the page, like guitar. That's not the A sound, it's not the A sound. That R requires that the A there in guitar sound different. The R is controlling that vowel sound. Think of the word car. It's not the A sound, it's not the A sound. The R is controlling the sound of that vowel, car. So an R-controlled vowel controls the sound the vowel makes in a word. Usually it's the vowel followed by the R. Two types of syllables. We have closed and open syllables. A closed syllable is a syllable that ends with a consonant sound. Don't get confused. It's not that it ends with a consonant grapheme. It's that it ends with a consonant phoneme. For example, the word home ends with an E, which is a vowel, but the sound that it ends with is the M sound, which is a consonant. So a closed syllable ends with a consonant sound. The word cap is another example. That P sound at the end of cap indicates that this is a one-syllable, closed syllable word. Open syllables, as you might expect, end with a long vowel sound. So we're going to have the word see with the long E sound. You'll see that it ends in its name as well. Baby. The E sound indicates an open syllable there. Remember that words can be multisyllabic. There can be words with more syllables than one. So sometimes these may come together. There may be a closed syllable at the beginning of a word and an open syllable at the end of a word, but it's all the same word. So we're talking about syllables within words specifically. Closed syllables have that consonant sound at the end. Open syllables have the long vowel sound at the end. I'd like you to set a timer and work through the Boggle puzzle to create words that include some vowel pairs that we looked at, like AI and EE and EA and TH and CH and all of those others that we saw previously in the presentation. Feel free to go back if you need to review. But I want you to spend about a minute looking at the Boggle board and creating words using some of the rules and letters and diphthongs and vowel pairs, and digraphs that we've just talked about. You can use any of the letters on the page, but only use them once if they appear on the page only once. And I want to see your list. I want to know how well you did. If you create a whole bunch of words in 1 minute, actually, let's do it for 30 seconds. Just do 30 seconds creating some words using vowel pairs and diphthongs and all those things. And I want to see how well you do. Let's look at one and see if we can come up with a word together. Try to be clean and think of this as a kid-friendly activity instead of creating some inappropriate words that could potentially come up here. But I see the word such, using the ch vowel consonant pair, consonant digraph. The S here, U, C, and H, such. If there are some other words that you can create in 30 seconds, I'd appreciate seeing your list. I'll give you 30 seconds to work on that, and then we'll close up our presentation for today. All right, pens down. Hopefully you've got a few words on there that you could tell us about the digraphs or the vowel pairs that you use to create your words. Feel free to continue creating words if you want. I love Boggle. It's one of my favorite games. And it's always fun for students to play in class too, especially when you're practicing how to create words. You could also scaffold your students by having a word wall on your bulletin board, or going over some words and having them written on the whiteboard in your class, or just allowing your students to have a list of words in front of them so that they have something to build on. That's our discussion on phonics. I hope that you've gotten a good bit of basic information about this. We are going to work a bit on this in class. And then I'm going to talk to you about an assignment that you're going to be doing with your case study student, which will come up soon at Bowie. So thank you for listening, and I hope you guys have a great day.